Hey y'all, back at it again with a collective reading today. Um, I have a hunch that today's reading is going to be a little bit longer, so I would grab your popcorn, your coffee, or your tea to get you through this one. Maybe just play it in the background while you're working on something else to make use of your time. Um, with this reading, I'm going to be incorporating some different elements, kind of like what I've been doing with the individual zodiac sign readings. So I'm going to be still using the Thoth, the Aleister Crowley Thoth deck for the general spread, but I'm also consulting the I Ching, and I've pulled a rune card as well. Now, I do want to mention that this is a collective reading, so obviously it's not going to resonate with every individual out there that sees this. The energies that I work with in my readings are very abstract, so a lot of the times it's very difficult for me to translate the information into something that's not only usable or understandable, but something that can be integrated on an individual level. So I try to keep the messages relatively generalized or relatively abstract because it's a little bit easier for you to translate that and trickle it down into something that can resonate with you and something that you can utilize in your own day-to-day life. Let's see. I feel like that's all the housekeeping that we need to take care of now. Yeah, it's a very interesting spread. I kind of sat here for a few minutes before I turned the camera on to kind of look it over and really connect with the message that was coming through. And I feel like a lot of it can be summed up with what came up for the I Ching today. The hexagram that we got was hexagram number 55, which looks like this. It's called opulence. And there were actually 3 changing lines when I cast the hexagram. So the first changing line is this one down at the bottom. Then we have the 3rd line and the 4th line. And what that tells me is that these are lines in the hexagram that have further information about the energy at hand. And I'll read through Benabel Wynn's I Ching book to kind of connect with what those lines mean, but also what the hexagram itself means. So hexagram number 55, the oracle says, honors bestowed, there is progressive movement, and there is clarity in the mind. You are in a position of great influence. You rise like the sun at the highest point in the sky. Be mindful when abundance becomes opulence. When abundance becomes opulence, the king will fall. Every age of enlightenment comes to a decline. A period of tremendous power is upon you, but bear in mind that this too shall pass. Embrace the tides of change, come what may. And before I read any further, I do want to specify what the 2 trigrams in this hexagram are. So this bottom trigram here, these 3 lines represent fire. This is Li. And then these top 3 lines right here represent thunder, which is Zheng, I think, or Zheng. Don't come at me for my terrible pronunciation. But yeah, this hexagram is composed of these 2, fire and thunder. So just keep that in mind as I continue reading. So it says, thunder and lightning, fullness for all. The sage renders judgments and verdicts, handing down punishments that fit the crimes. You, or someone, is in a position of great influence, and you use your authority to bring justice. The king attains abundance and is free of worries, prosperity and fortune at the noon hour. You will reach great heights of success, like the sun at the highest point in the sky. Bookmark that in your mind, because I'm going to touch on that with one of the cards that came up over here. The inciting of movement brings light, clarity, and success. However, abundance soon becomes opulence. When abundance becomes opulence, the king will fall. Thus, abundance comes in cycles. Opulence comes in cycles. Every age of enlightenment will decline. Every king's reign will end. To know when you have enough is to be immune from disgrace. To know when to stop is to be preserved from perils. Only thus can you endure for long. A period of tremendous power is upon you, a time of advancement, the height of social and civil progress. However, keep in mind that this too shall pass. What goes up will come down. Embrace the tides of change, come what may. Enjoy the moment of power and prestige while it lasts. Interesting, right? So the first change line is the first line, the bottom line. And what she has here is meeting their match. For a while, no troubles, endeavoring forth, the matter is yet to be valued. And she kind of elaborates further on this. So says the subtext of meeting their match is that both are equally powerful rulers in their own rights. There is an affinity. Moreover, the meeting is one of mutual benefit and opportunity. Translated as a while here, which is soon, can indicate 10 days or 10 years. It's a general indication for a period of time. Sheng is translated as valued, meaning the final accounting of Lux has yet to be assessed. We'll keep that in mind too, because there's some Jupiter connection here in the reading. There is still some uncertainty for the long-term future. Soon is also a reference to the Shang dynasty god associated with the passage of time, corresponding with the 10-day week, or the 10 heavenly stems of lunisolar astrology, and the trigram fire. Thus, the first line can be interpreted as an omen or a call from a fire god, or the personification of time. To ensure long-term success, elevate the match to more than just a fair weather friendship. Demonstrate loyalty, and loyalty will be reciprocated. The matter you are consulting the oracle for meets with tentative approval from the oracle. Next changing line is the third line. Opulence swift upon them, abundance. The lesser constellations can be seen at noon, which keep that in mind as well, because I think it connects to the eclipse energies that we're moving into. I mean, later this month we'll be having an annular lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces. So that won't be visible for most of us. I think it's like passing over the southeastern Pacific and then like the southern tip of South America. But that energy is still going to be there, and it's also leading into a solar eclipse later in October. And that one's going to be taking place in Libra. So keep that in mind as well. There's a lot of eclipse energies with these next two changing lines that came up with this hexagram. Droplets of stardust glimmering in the sun, a misty veil over the light, a broken right arm, no irreparable harm. So the third line continues the narrative of the king. After reaching the heights of prosperity, the king's reign is now on the decline. The king is about to be overthrown. It is an unsettling time of changes. That lesser constellations can be seen at noon suggests a darkened sky, like an eclipse, signifying significantly darker than the second line, which isn't really relevant for this particular spread. The sky has darkened to the point where even the lesser constellations are now visible at high noon. The solar eclipse narrative from the second line has now reached such occultation that the daytime sky is in total darkness by the third. This is a total eclipse. Day has become night. The king calls upon a magus to reverse the eclipse and bring back the sun. The magus tries, but is unable to reverse the eclipse. The king breaks the magus's arm as punishment for the failure. Though the final outcome has not passed yet, the story foreshadows that the eclipse will subside and the light will return, hence the young line of the third. The magus is pardoned, thus no irreparable harm. The misty veil shrouds understanding, clarity, truthfulness, and integrity. Do not make your judgment of the situation yet, because you do not have all the facts. You do not yet know the whole truth of the matter, so refrain from taking sides. That in itself is interesting, because a lot of the readings that I've been doing lately have been really emphasizing this need to kind of sit and wait for more information to come in, like trying to determine a decision or make a judgment of the circumstances based on what's there in the present is it was like being kind of frowned upon or like repressed a little bit. It was like very much this energy of hold on, wait, there's more to come. You don't have all the information yet. You haven't all of the events haven't taken place yet that need to fall into order to make this work, or something like that. So I think there's been like 3, maybe 4 different readings that I've done where that energy was very much emphasized. So the last changing line that we have for the hexagram today is the fourth line. It says, opulence veiled, the Big Dipper and Pole Star are seen at noon. A fortuitous meeting with the foreign king, a favorable outcome. At the moment of the fourth line, the eclipse underway since the second line is still ongoing, though it is subsiding a bit. The phrasings in the second and fourth lines mirror each other, whereas the third line denoted the darkest point of the eclipse. The worst is now over, and it is the lightening of the dark, though at this point the sky is still in partial darkness, which means clarity, truthfulness, and integrity are still obstructed. However, the fourth line predicts that the darkness is finally coming to an end. Light is visibly returning. An auspicious time for an alliance. Like the theme expressed earlier in the narrative arc, this is an opportune encounter between two equally capable kings. In divination, fortuitous meeting with the foreign king is interpreted as a new opportunity coming your way. You are emerging from darker times, and soon a great offer with the promise of abundance and prosperity will present itself. The foreign king here is also a specific reference to an eastern tribe or clan. Thus, the king is from a land east of the Inquirer. Very interesting stuff. I'm going to try not to get political with this spread, but I feel like the message itself kind of overrides politics. Because I feel like there's a bigger arc, a bigger story that's happening that sort of brushes our political affiliations and identifications and nation identities to the side, because I feel like that paradigm is slowly crumbling. Maybe something that's relevant with Pluto dipping back into Capricorn, where we're revisiting the themes of the old world. Like, we're still hanging on to the threads of this once majestic cloak, but now it's like it's frayed and it's falling apart. And this cloak was like the nobility of nationhood. So we'll kind of I'll talk a little bit more on that as I get to the tarot spread, but I wanted to talk about the rune that came up for the reading today, which is Othilla, which is separation. That's what it's called in this deck. And if I can get it to focus, that would be great. Interesting that it focuses on the portion that I don't have the focus set to. So one of the themes of this particular rune is the idea of inheritance. And the reason why inheritance comes up is because innate within the concept, or innate within the experience of inheriting something, is this idea of loss, of this idea of letting go. Usually you don't inherit something unless the person you're inheriting it from is passed on, is dying or is dead. So there's this element of sacrifice, this element of leaving something behind in order to gain or enter into a new paradigm or grasp something new. We do have the death card coming up in the tarot spread, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So very much this energy of leaving behind what no longer serves, leaving behind the cloak of nationhood, if that's how we'll interpret it. This rune to me also, it connects with this eclipse energy that we're moving into. And eclipses are like the points of collective change. Like, change will happen on an individual level for sure, but it also signifies changes for the larger governance, the state or authority in some way, because it does represent an usurpment or a change within the two luminaries, the sun and the moon, which are typically the significators for like a king or a queen or a president, or people in higher positions of power, whose decisions affect the masses. These fulcrum points of power where one little decision has implications for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, even billions in some cases. So especially even with the I Ching hexagram that came through, I almost get like the sense of like a changing of the guard, or like an adjustment in power, an exchange of power. I know it was talking a little bit about an alliance between two parties, two nations, or two people in some way, and I'm not really connecting with that just yet. I do want to see what comes out with the rest of the spread here and see if maybe there's more clarification on what that could be or on what that could represent. But what's really being emphasized here is this like eclipse energy. I mean, we have the luminaries coming up. We have the sun representing himself here in the tarot spread. We have the moon kind of coming out. I mean, we have the Six of Discs right here, which is the middle decan of Taurus, moon ruled, which is the reason I'm bringing it up. We have Venus representing herself with the Empress here. Sorry, my hair is kind of getting in my way. It's not quite long enough where I can pull it back and forget about it. It just does what it wants at this point. But yeah, so most of the focus planetarily wise, like astrologically wise with the spread, there's a lot of emphasis on Jupiter, on Venus, and on the sun. There's a little bit of interaction with the moon. Mercury's kind of here and Saturn's kind of here, but I feel like the main players in the spread today are Jupiter, Venus, and the sun, which is an interesting little trifecta. Currently, at the time that I'm doing this reading, Venus is in her home sign of Libra. This is Venus right here, the Empress. Got a little bit more Venus emphasis here with this Nine of Discs, so that middle decan of Virgo, which is Venus ruled. Let's see, I thought I saw her somewhere else. I guess not. Do have the Princess of Discs, which I guess you could connect that either to Mercury or to Venus. But yeah, so the way that I have these cards laid out, I feel like the narrative is kind of raining down. So we have these 4 cards on the top. I have 12 cards in total, 3 rows of 4. So first card, we have the Nine of Discs right here, middle decan of Virgo, Venus ruled. Then we have the sun, obviously the sun. Then we have the Six of Discs. That's the middle decan of Taurus, moon ruled. Then we have the Nine of Cups, middle decan of Pisces, Jupiter ruled, and that's also where Saturn is currently, which keep that in mind because right beneath that card in the next row, we have the Three of Swords, which is the middle decan of Libra, but what I want to emphasize right here is that it is a Saturn ruled decan. It's interesting that Saturn is showing up right beneath the middle decan of Pisces where he's currently traversing. So definitely like a confirmation of that energy there that's kind of hanging out in the background and emphasizing this larger playing field that everything else is happening within. Next to that, under the Six of Discs, we have the Two of Discs, change. Now this to me, right underneath the moon card, I shouldn't say the moon card, but the moon ruled decan of Taurus, the Six of Discs right here, is like further confirmation of the eclipse energy that we're moving into. It is also diagonal to the sun card right here. Right below the sun card, we have the the Ten of Swords, which is the last decan of Gemini, and that was the card that I wanted you to keep in mind with the I Ching hexagram, where it said, prosperity and fortune at the noon hour, you will reach great heights of success like the sun at the highest point in the sky. Inherent in that imagery, like the last decan of Gemini, leading up to the very cardinal point of Cancer, that's where the sun hits the northern solstice. That's the point, the highest point that the sun takes in the sky. And inherent in that point is this idea that the sun is now going to be moving southward again, and the days in the northern hemisphere are going to become shorter with each progressive day. There's this idea of decline inherent in the ascent. Like once you reach the highest point, where do you go from there? Back down to the earth. So keep that in mind. Next to that, under the 9 of discs, we have the 8 of wands. This is a Mercury ruled decan. It's the first decan of Sagittarius. And it's the only time that Mercury really shows up in this spread. Underneath that card, we have the Empress, Venus. Next to her, underneath the 10 of Swords, we have the Princess of Discs. Then next to her, under the 2 of Discs, we have Scorpio, Death. And then next to that, we have Jupiter showing up with the Wheel of Fortune underneath Saturn. So like a callback to the fact that Saturn is being ruled by Jupiter currently, not only by domicile, but is also occupying Jupiter's decan within Pisces. So this is kind of why I'm saying that Jupiter is one of the major players that's showing up in this spread here. Like, Jupiter is in Mercury's sign of Gemini currently, I believe in Mercury's decan, that middle decan of Gemini. I'm trying to do mental math 1 second. That middle decan of Gemini is actually Mars ruled, excuse me. So, I mean, there's a little bit of Mars showing up as well, especially with Scorpio being represented here. But yeah, so let's get into this now that we have the cards kind of identified. Intuitively, the story that was coming through and is continuing to come through is this sense of power shifting, of emphasis of power, not necessarily being diffused, but being dispersed. Like, I'm looking at the sun card as I'm saying that. Like, if you see these two figures, they're dancing in the rays of the sun. Like, this power of the sun, this central point, it's like it's radiating outward and they're collecting it with their outstretched arms. And I feel like inherent in these eclipse energies is this realization that we, the people of any nation, any state, any county, city, have kind of absolved ourselves of responsibility and power and given it over to these central authorities, these singular points. I heard singular points of failure, like relying so heavily on elected officials or unelected officials, monarchy, like that entire paradigm or idea of centralized governance is being called into our awareness. Because there is no possibility for this system to offer representation for every person. There are so many different ideas and opinions and beliefs and ideas about how things should look, how things should be run, infinitely varied across across the individual level. Like, there's no way for every single person to agree on any one thing. And I think there's a sense of nobility behind trying to elect or have a person in a position of power that best represents the amalgam like if that person has good intentions, like they can do their best to try to represent everyone with all their variability, but I mean there's always going to be somebody who's disappointed, somebody who doesn't agree with what's being done. And I mean, frankly, that's like best case scenario. Like right now I feel like most of the world is experiencing a realization of just how corrupt our power systems are, a realization that the people who often feel called to represent themselves in positions of power, to take on authority, have their own interests in mind. And they pursue those interests irrespective of whether or not it represents or benefits their constituents, the people that they're representing or supposed to represent. And I keep looking at this sun right here. It's just like these rays spreading out in all these different directions, and these people beneath gathering it up in their arms. And it's like the key word that I'm seeing with this image is like decentralization. Like maybe this is a period in time where we start to realize that centralized governance isn't working anymore. Like maybe there's going to be some sort of worldly manifestation of why, like some sort of confirmation that shows more and more people that, hey, this system isn't working and it's not going to work. Like you need to come up with something different, something that doesn't rely on a single point of failure. I heard like checks and balances, but I think something that resonates or is more relevant to the individual rather than the amalgam, rather than the it's like I heard community, but then I was like, no, because that's still relevant, but some larger scale. Like I feel like our scale of governance, our scale of authority has been blown so large. Like governments ruling over countries that are so big, there's no way that they can represent the individuals that make up the country. Like scaling it down to the more localized levels. And it could be just based on this eclipse, these eclipse energies, based on the hexagram, based on kind of how I'm seeing the imagery playing out. Somebody in a position of power either falls out of that position, is usurped in some way, or makes a decision that is destructive for the system of authority within which it operates, but is actually very good for the masses. Like there's a lot of really positive cards here, but what I'm seeing is that it's like it's kind of top down. Like it's weird. I keep seeing like this image of this pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid, it's like the capstone is broken open, and this water just comes gushing out of it, and is just, pouring down the sides of this pyramid and reaching the lowest of the low. Like it's reaching the bottom. But the capstone has been blown apart. It's like it's irreparable. There's no way for that capstone to be replaced to stop this flow. Like this flow is too powerful. I feel like it's almost pushing the stones of the pyramid apart. Like I'm watching it kind of fall apart as the water's gushing out of it. It's like distributing abundance to where it's actually needed rather than being so consolidated in these single points. if we put half as much energy into building up our local communities, cultivating our local resources, cultivating local power, local governance, local representation, as we do into these officials that oversee umbrellas with over umbrellas over umbrellas over umbrellas, these very centralized, unseen overseers, there'd be a lot more opportunity for abundance to be shared, for a wider spread fertility, a wider spread. I'm hearing a word that's like between satiation and nourishment. So something, combination of those two words. Like I'm seeing the homeless with food. Whatever events or experiences that are going to be unfolding over the course of the next little while, I'm seeing like maybe 2-3 months, just based on the eclipse timeline here, but obviously it can ripple out to like the next 6 months within this eclipse cycle, the larger eclipse cycle, larger Saturn cycle. Like this is something that's obviously continuously unfolding, but I feel like whatever is going to be happening in the near future, I feel like it's within a few months from when I'm recording this. There is going to be a realignment of priorities and a realization among the common folk, among the masses, of what their real priorities ought to be. Because right now there's this almost senseless battle happening between political parties. We're vying for incomplete representation by these idolized figures that don't even have their interests in mind. Like don't even have the interests of their constituents in mind, like I was saying earlier. Like, and we're fighting for the least worst person to take on the responsibility of making the decisions that we don't want to make ourselves. Whatever we're moving into, whatever new world that we're moving into, dystopia aside, all the different dystopian futures that we've been programmed into believing are inevitable. I don't think they are, first off. It's like we've been programmed to absolve ourselves of responsibility and of power, of even interest in taking part in the creative role, like creating this new world, creating this new system. And it's not gonna fly in this new world. Like every individual is going to have a say and is going to take an active role. Not to say that we aren't already, but I feel like a lot of our individual decisions and opinions and creative projects and ideas don't hold a lot of merit because they're kind of overseen by, these pyramidal systems, these pyramids within pyramids within pyramids. But it's not going to work like that anymore. I'm looking at this 8 of Wands card right here as I'm saying that, where it's like you have these kind of central points, but they're all like connecting to other points in different directions. You got the 4 cardinal directions and the 4 cross quarters. But I get the sense that in these directions there's other points, and these points intersect and interact with the points around them. There's no single point of failure because every point is connected and interwoven with every other point. And it's interesting to me that that's underneath this 9 of discs right here, which is the card that I was looking at when I was talking about like redistribution of wealth. This this idea of abundance flowing down from the pyramid, which was also kind of connecting to this 9 of cups right here. But I'm looking at it in relation to this 8 of wands right here. This confirmation of the decentralization idea that I was having. And I'm seeing it in terms of like financial systems. Like a lot of our political power is vested in our financial, I heard reserves, but that's not the word I'm trying to come up with. I guess just our financial systems. Like political power is hinged on it. And you can kind of see that with like the power that the American dollar has in worldwide trade and everything like that. But it's like that's not how it's going to look. I'm getting like Mercury's going to be conjoining with the sun late September. I think like the 30th of September, the 1st of October, around that time. And what I'm seeing with that is like this idea of being like the old unnecessary ideas and layers being burnt off by the sun, you know, that old skin being shed by the snake. This sense of leaving behind old ideas and starting with the fundamental idea. What is value? What is it that we're actually exchanging? How do we value each other as individuals and the goods and the services that we offer one another, the resources, whatever form those resources take? There's this need for reevaluation, this need for I was hearing researching, but it was like there's this clear distinction, like don't get caught up in the researching. Like there's a need for actually doing something with the information. Like all talk and no no substance. Like don't get lost in that intellectual sphere, because that's been the problem this entire time, is these people who have read all the books, have done all the research, who know that there's something wrong with the current system and who know what tweaks can potentially be made to fix it, or to create something different, create something new. But it's like they stay in this speculative sphere rather than actually being integrated on the physical level, like where the changes are actually happening. It's like the pieces and the information are there in place, they're in order. Now it's just a matter of integrating it, of interesting. It was like this image of somebody like pulling gold coins out of the clouds, like bringing the wealth down to where it can be used and utilized. And then I'm seeing this person that was taking the gold coins out of the clouds, like breaking the coins in half and like handing them out to everybody, like making sure that everybody has their share. But it's interesting because I was just like asking, like as I was seeing that image, I was like, is this like universal basic income or something like that, some sort of concept like that. And it was like, no, this is different. Like whatever we're moving into, it doesn't fit into the models of the past. It's never been done before. It hasn't even been attempted. It's going to be such a novel concept. I feel like the system ripples out for millennia. Like it's revolutionary. So I want to go back to this Ten of Swords energy right here, which again is that last decan of Gemini. Call back to that idea of, once you reach the highest point, the only place to go from there is down. Right beneath that card, we have this Princess of Discs right here. And this to me feels like I'm hearing somebody who was there for the wealth distribution, like somebody who was in the audience when the person was reaching up into the clouds and grabbing the gold coins and distributing them. Like they've gotten their share, and now they're beginning the process of rising to the occasion of creating something with the resources that they now have access to. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be literally like people, they're handing out money. Like, what is money? Resources, energy, time. Maybe even something more fundamental than that. Like I'm no expert, and obviously whatever it is that's coming forward is beyond my comprehension from where I'm standing in the present. But it's like this person has access to these resources now, and is utilizing them to make something. Like I'm almost getting the sense that she's looking into a cauldron, and like you can kind of see her staff right here. There's like a beam of energy going down into this cauldron. And to me, there's like this idea that she's mixed the appropriate ingredients in their appropriate portions, which is something I'm getting from the disc that she's holding, just kind of how it's segmented, but also balanced and harmonized. But there's this very clear emphasis on the individual taking an active role in the shaping of the world. Gathering the resources that are available and making them into something that's usable and workable. Interesting that phrase keeps coming up, huh? Because I think I mentioned that in the little disclaimer I gave in the beginning. You also have Venus right here, right next to her. Right underneath that Eight of Wands, I'm hearing like decentralized wealth. Like the resources have been distributed, everyone has access to whatever it is that they need to do whatever it is that they do best. Like individual abilities and skills are being honored in this system. Like everybody has something different to offer, but it's all contributing to the larger. One of the things that I've been connecting with the past couple of days, especially where Venus is concerned, is this idea of structure, this idea of structured harmony. Like I've been kind of delving into like how the Fibonacci numbers and mathematics integrate with astrology, especially with every level of reality, but astrology as being like one of the main manifestations or interactions with those mathematical principles. And the idea of Venus and how its orbit relative to our earthly perspective produces this five-pointed star or this five-petaled flower over the course of her orbits in time. It brings to mind this idea of harmony, of even like divinely, intelligently designed harmony. Like you can see the five in our hands and our toes. You can see it in nature sometimes, in different plants and flowers. Even the structure of certain minerals, there's this integration of the principle of five. But when I think of five, I think of like action, of acting, of creating. Imparting divine will onto the manifest, often through the medium of the hands, which is why there's this idea of like creating and acting and doing. And she is looking right over to this Princess of Discs. Like this is how they're laid out on the spread, like this. This figure has integrated the principles of divine harmony. She is in tune with the natural cycles. She is in tune with the innate resources available to her, both in her locale, like where she lives, the land that she's living off of, and also her inner resources. And she's bringing those two principles together to create something. And I keep looking over at these roots behind her. Where I live, I live in the southeast United States, and so there's a lot of swamps. And in these swamps, there are these cypress trees, which they're some of my favorite trees. They're so beautiful and spooky, very Saturnian-looking trees. But they're buttressed at the base. Like they have very thick, widespread roots in order to stabilize themselves in places where the water is usually continuously running. They live in these swamps where the water is continuously flowing through, bringing with it silt and sometimes taking soil with it. So it needs to be able to stabilize itself with these widespread roots. And the particular cypress trees I'm thinking of right now also have another mechanism of potentially stabilization. Like there's no clear consensus on what they're for, but the roots will form these points that are called knees at the base. And it's like these random points around the tree on the ground where the roots just like decide to grow up into these conical shapes. And they almost look like stalagmites. It gives you like this impression of being in like a cave almost. But I'm feeling like it's connecting with this card because it's this idea of adapting to where you are. This idea of using and representing your locale. Maybe connecting back to this idea of governance. Like if governance is occurring on the individual level rather than on these centralized overseeing states, then there's a lot more relevance to the individual experience and environment. It was weird. I was looking into the card and like seeing the knees of these cypress trees, and it was like, these are the new pyramids. Like a well-rooted individual spreading themselves out, connecting with the land that they live on. adapting themselves to their land and gathering and producing a harvest, producing fruit, producing cones. Interesting. I'm also getting like the sense of like these knees, these conical roots that form at the base of the cypress trees as being like a system that allows silt to gather, like with the water that's flowing through it, like creates these spaces that kind of hold on to the material that's flowing with the water, and allows the land to kind of build up rather than being washed away. So maybe this idea of like building up the local environment, building the soil, which kind of connects back to, I think, the Capricorn reading where the imagery of the chinampas was coming up, where there's almost a sense of like, be where you are, but improve it. Like all the resources are there and available to you to use your human ingenuity, use the divine intelligence to create harmony and to create growth and abundance out of nothing, out of barren land, with the proper treatment and direction. Even, the most dry, wasted deserts can become bountiful, lush food forests. Next to her, we have the Death card, and the Death card is showing up underneath the Two of Coins right here. Which is underneath the Six of Coins, which is that moon ruled decan of Taurus, the middle decan of Taurus that we were talking about. Now, these are the eclipse cards that I was talking about. Scorpio energy is all about shifting, change, transformation, realizing that the outer world is constantly shifting and changing, and maybe reckoning with the feeling of instability that comes with that, or maybe learning to find an inner state of non-attachment, but in the process understanding that there is a constant cycle of letting go, of separating and giving up, of dying and being reborn, inherent in existing as anything. And I'm being called to look over at this Three of Swords right here, this decan ruled by Saturn. That's the middle decan of Libra. Saturn being in Pisces right now. I was born with Saturn in Pisces natally, so this is my Saturn return, and inherent in that placement is like this sense of being a ship or on a boat that's out in the middle of the ocean, like the deep, deep ocean where you have like miles of water beneath you, and trying to drop anchor here, like in the middle of the ocean where there's no ground for the anchor to latch onto and hold the boat in place. And so you're just like this boat with the anchor dropped, drifting in the water, no secure place to land or stay affixed to. But inherent in that instability, inherent in that being lost at sea, is an opportunity to find an inner security. When you can't rely on the outer world that's constantly shifting and changing and just a constant confirmation of instability or instability, then it kind of teaches you or forces you to rely on yourself as the provider of security and stability. And I feel like that's absolutely necessary in a new world that's based on individual governance. that's based on the collective power of the individual rather than the individual power over the collective. Like, we need to find the inner security, the inner stability, and with that comes a recognition that we can acquire wealth, we can acquire status, we can acquire power and build it up and up and up and up and up, but it's guaranteed that we will either lose it, that there will be an attack from the outside in some way, some form, or that it won't even touch or satisfy a deeper part of ourselves. And so often what the response to that for most people is well, I'm just going to acquire more and more and more. I'm just going to gather more things, more money, more this, more that, more relationships, and that's going to satisfy me. And there's like a collective need for us to let that go. That's the old world. That's the old paradigm. There's no room for that in what's coming. What's coming is going to require each of us to embody the best of us, to work through the little animal tendencies that we have. We've been blessed with these bodies, these minds that are so perfectly equipped and attuned for manipulating and shaping and creating and interacting with this physical reality in a way that is so much more, there's so much more opportunity there than there is in any other physical form that we could take. Like the human body is perfect for for this world. That gives us an advantage over, all the other animals and life forms on the planet in some ways. But it also gives us responsibility. We're capable of caring for and helping the other life forms that we share this planet with. I don't like to call back to like biblical ideas, but I feel like there is some truth in humanity being sort of stewards of this planet, of this garden. Because we have the faculty, we have the know-how, and we have the tools available to us to protect the garden, to protect the inhabitants of the garden, and to create something that honors and incorporates the whole while benefiting the individuals, the individual parts that make it up. Interesting. So I'm seeing, the imagery that I'm seeing is like the individual cells in a human body, and like there's diseased portions, and in order for the diseased portions to reach health, it's like everything needs to be operating at its best, like the temperature going up, like a fever, burning out the disease or something like that. It's like the vibration needs to be raised up, the approach needs to be pulled up and away from base consciousness, where we're being pulled in every which direction by our desires for sex, or our desires for food, our desires for wealth, for power, for recognition, for an unchanging, stable, secure material environment that we're guaranteed to not retain. We need to pull up and out of that and grow into even better embodiments of the human expression. We are capable of being so much better than we are. And in order to have a collective shift into a world that not only fosters that mentality or approach, not only fosters that manifestation of humanity, I was getting distracted by this Wheel of Fortune card right here. This is Jupiter coming through in the reading, like I was saying earlier. But what I'm hearing as I'm looking at the card is a conversation that I had with a friend a really long time ago. We were up in the mountains somewhere, and I'm pretty sure we had taken some mushrooms. But he was telling me something about Jupiter that I hadn't heard of at the time, and I still haven't really confirmed this since, that plants grow based on the interaction that Jupiter has on our planet. Like Jupiter oversees some sort of principle of growth within plants, kind of like a gravitational pull or something. That's kind of how he explained it. I remember trying to figure out if this was something that I could verify, and I don't think I ever did. But I think that concept coming up right now is interesting because Jupiter does represent the principle of growth and the principle of embodying higher ideals, of higher intelligence, of even tradition in some way. But not tradition in a dogmatic sense, like I'm seeing somebody swiping away like the church, like all the old popes and cardinals and preachers and pastors and all the representatives of the old system being moved out of the way. Interesting. That was a very vivid image of the human brain, and it like the wrinkles like taking on more dimension. Like, you know how a dolphin has like more wrinkles and it indicates a higher intelligence, or so we've been told. But that image of the brain taking on more complexity, more I'm hearing more processing power. Like, if nothing else, this reading is just like really drilling it in. Like, we are capable of being so much better than we are, but it takes the individual, it takes us. And I know that's a fact that's like beaten, that we're beaten with over the head for most of us in like the spiritual community. Like, be the change that you want to see in the world. Like, it's almost annoying to hear that at this point, but it's like the reason why it's so annoying and the reason why it's so prevalent is because it's so important and we haven't figured it out. And I'm feeling like this almost like this collective frustration, like self-frustration. Like, we're frustrated with ourselves because we know that we're capable of so much better and we know better than what we're doing, but we keep I heard relapsing. Like, we keep going back to the old ways because that's the way it's always been done. So, there must be some truth in that, right? Whatever we're moving into is going to require a shedding of the old skin, is going to require us to let go a lot of the past. Maybe even letting go of cultural or traditional identities, national identities, attachments to financial systems, attachments to governance, political affiliation, philosophies, faiths, and beliefs. Like, those are all like segmented thinking. It's interesting. I heard like once unity consciousness is achieved, everything else trickles out in harmony. Like the fractal the fractal unfolds perfectly in relation to its source, the infinite source. Sorry, I'm sitting here like calling out. I'm like, is there anything else that needs to come through? Is that the is that the meat of the reading? Is that the crux of it? Okay, I think the last thing, I'm looking back at this Ten of Swords right here, and I was looking closer at that sword that's breaking in the middle. And I was hearing something along the lines of breaking out of tunnel vision. Like, we've been so narrow-minded and so focused on such small-scale, unimportant issues that we've completely lost sight of the bigger picture. We're losing sight of the larger evolution that's taking place. Maybe even losing sight of what the government is actually doing, like that could be inherent in that. But in order to move forward into the future, I'm hesitant to say like the right timeline, but that's very much like the sense that I'm getting. In order to move into the right path, we need to jailbreak ourselves. Shed the old programming and beliefs and ideas that only the dystopian futures that have been written about or had movies made about them, like those are the only possible realities, because human nature, frankly, up until this point, I don't think we've been behaving like humans. We've been animals with 5 fingers and opposable thumbs. That, not to, demean or diminish the importance or sacredness of the animals, but we have a responsibility. With the greater faculties that we have available to us as human beings, we have a greater responsibility and we haven't been being responsible. We haven't been utilizing our faculties to their fullest. And I'm reconnecting to the reading I think I did for Scorpio. I think it was Scorpio, where it was like a blacksmith working the forge, but it was like they were on a time crunch to get the project completed because there was this like wave of incoming energy coming towards them, and they had to finish it before that wave got to them. Like this sense of, it's interesting. It's like I'm seeing like a black and white reality, and this wave comes through, and as it passes, the reality like bursts into vibrant color. It's like people are looking around for the first time, realizing what they're, not only what they're capable of, but what their experience has to offer them. Like the world completely shifting in some way because of this incoming wave. It's just like the energy that it brings with it completely changes reality, or rather it completely changes our experience of reality and experience of ourselves, so that we're attuned to more frequencies. We're taking in the fuller spectrum. And how we get to that is going to look different for each of us. No one approach is going to apply to any two people because of how unique every one of us is. we've come into this world with very unique perspectives, very unique gifts and talents and approaches. And all of that is going to be valued in the new reality. You're going to have to operate at max capacity, but it's not going to feel exhausting. Like, I'm looking back at these figures dancing in the sunlight. Like, the source energy is infinite. There's no poverty. There's no room for poverty because abundance is infinite. It's everywhere. In this new reality, I think we've inherited this worn out idea that to be alive is to suffer. I don't think that's necessary or true. I think each of us knows of at least one person who has weathered the worst circumstances in their life, but is able to still enjoy their experience and still find positivity in every situation that they've gone through. Like, genuinely, not like a smile masking sorrow or bad feelings. But it's like, to suffer is a choice. To be a victim is a choice. And that's dangerous to say, I know. We are so much more powerful and capable than we give ourselves credit for. And we need to stop surrendering that to idols or figures that don't represent the best of humanity. Be the best of humanity. Represent the best of humanity by being the best of humanity yourself. I do want to touch on the six of discs before we close out this reading. Obviously, you can tell that I'm nearing the end of this. And what I want to call some attention to is the fact that each of these discs have the planetary symbols in them, but they're ordered and structured in a way that it creates a harmonious hexagram. Interesting, I Ching hexagram. It's utilizing the divine symphony, utilizing the divine orchestra that plays out above our heads, and harnessing the power, working with the power, working within the cycles, creating, I'm hearing like creating sigils, creating yantras, which are like geometric designs that are the embodiments of specific energies. It's like reconnecting with that. I'm hearing like divine architect, like becoming the divine architect, like attuning yourself and becoming aware of the different frequencies that make up manifest reality, and reconnecting with the source frequency, embodying the source frequency, because the source is what is able to shape reality and give it structure, give it form on the atomic level, subatomic level, subatomic level, all the way up to the largest scales that we can conceive of. feel like in this new reality, we become the divine architect. We unify ourselves with the divine architect and obviously express it in our own individual fashion. It's like rays of the sun all going out in different directions, but emanating from the same source, maybe slightly different hues with each ray, but still coming from the same source, different expressions of the same ultimate thing, and all of this working together to form a pure light that embodies all wavelengths across the spectrum, the totality of experience, the totality of possible manifestation. Okay, I'm getting the go ahead. I think that was it for this reading. Obviously, a lot, a lot to unpack. Take what you can. Maybe sit and think about other points that you don't understand, or revisit it later. That's sometimes something I have to do even for my own personal readings, because like I said, there's just a lot of abstract energy that I connect with, and translating it is very difficult. So try to apply it in your own individual experience as you can, if you can, or just come back to it later when it makes more sense with a little bit more context, maybe. But yeah, after this reading, I'm feeling pretty optimistic. I'm also feeling a little bit like the cosmos is like, take some responsibility, so I feel a little bit inspired to maybe enact some changes on a personal level. And I hope that it inspires the same in you, and that we can all work towards creating this vibrant, holistic future. It's just, I feel like we're all in for a big surprise. Like, it's any expectations that we have, just the shapes won't even fit the sockets. Like, I don't know what it is, but I know that much. We got this. We're in this together. It's probably going to be very difficult at certain parts, because the process of shedding, the process of letting go, can be very difficult and painful. But remember, suffering is a choice. There is a deeper part of all of us, the source consciousness, the spirit, the self, God, whatever you want to call it within, that isn't tainted, isn't touched by, isn't hurt or even pleased by anything that happens in the manifest reality. All of this is like a projection on a screen to that deeper part of ourselves. So I think this is like an invitation to reconnect with that. And the world that we create from that place, from that consciousness, from that awareness, from that, dare I say, like enlightened state, is like beyond our best dreams, our wildest dreams. And I'm looking back at the hexagram, the first line. One of the significations that we touched on was translated as a while here. Soon can indicate, soon, X-U-N, can indicate 10 days or 10 years. It's a general indication for a period of time. Shang, is translated as valued, meaning the final accounting of lux has yet to be assessed. There is still some uncertainty for the long-term future. So whatever this process is obviously something that's going to take a deal of time for it to blossom and come forth, because there is a great deal that we need to leave behind in order to move into that, in order to be that image of Mercury that I was talking about, where we've burned away in the light of the sun all the old identities and systems in order to make room for the new world. You know, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of ups and downs and fortune through this process. But do your best to find that anchor within yourself. Even if you're out in the middle of the sea being tossed about by the waves, no land in sight, no land beneath you, you exist. Find security and stability within yourself, first and foremost. The ultimate security, the ultimate stability. Embody it and create from that. And best of luck. Wishing you the best, as always, and I will see you soon.